And greetings, everybody. Welcome to the Evidence and Reasons for the Christian Faith video channel. I'm Salvador Cordova, and this is going to be a variety show tonight. I know I haven't been on YouTube very much in the past few days, and that's part of one of my announcements. Things have gotten very busy. I have a job, and there are one or two business opportunities that I'm pursuing, so if I'm doing it right, I should be trying to get in 120 hours a week of work, which I doubt I will achieve. I'd be happy if I could even have an 80-hour work week. So a little bit more on that. I wanted to say how much I miss you all, and it's been a fun time this summer, and I can't thank you all enough for supporting me during this difficult time in this season of grief. But I'm comforted that my mother is in the best place possible, in the Lord's hands and in God's presence. It's just a little difficult for those of us who are still here. So, yes, thank you. And so with that, I just wanted to say I'm going to miss spending time and doing these long YouTube things. And so this isn't goodbye. And so it's funny, Dr. Dan is here. I'm going to be talking about one of my favorite evolutionary psychologists. And since he's here, I might as well highlight the book. This one is by Dr. Helen Fisher, The Nature and Chemistry of Romantic Love, Dr. Helen Fisher. So that's just a preview, and I know it's late for Dr. Dan. So with that, let's see what's on the docket. It has been some very sobering news that's happening in Afghanistan, especially to our Christian brothers and sisters there who are suffering terrible persecution at the hands of the Taliban and the there's some beauty. I'm not going to trash it. There's actually some really good stuff. We're going to talk about how I used it could be classified either as evolutionary psychology or behavioral biology, how I used what they call, what's it called? Copying. I have it here. It's a theory from sexual selection, mate choice copying, something like that. But I'm not going to trash it. This should be a lot of fun. So I'll be reading a little bit from Helen Fisher. This is actually, it doesn't even have to be, I don't know why they classified it as evolutionary psychology. It's actually just basic observations in behavioral biology. So I'm looking forward. This is actually one of the few times that I actually enjoy reading evolutionary literature, is when it actually just focuses on behavioral biology. So, but I was talking about Christian brothers and sisters in Afghanistan and throughout the world. There's a lot of prayer because of the suffering and persecution there. And one of the verses that was on my mind, Luke 23:29, for behold, the days are coming in which they shall say, blessed are the barren, and blessed are, and the wombs that have never bare, and the paps that have never given suck. So what that means is Jesus was prophesying of, I believe that is a specific end time prophecy, but it can be extrapolated to many situations throughout the history of Christendom, and really, for that matter, almost any time where there is distress, that it could be so bad that people would say, blessed are the barren, and the wombs that never have borne, and the breasts that have never nursed. And this verse has resonated with me on many levels. 18 years ago, when I was thinking about getting married, there were a couple girls that I had been interested in, and I'll never forget. I was after a tennis date, I was driving a young lady back to her apartment, and it was kind of romance in the air. Uh, this young lady I was very attracted to. I know she knew I liked her, and she'd be calling me up and saying, "Hey Sal, let's go play tennis." And we go play tennis, and we go out to dinner and stuff. And just one of those nights, I felt there was something in the air. And we were driving along, and she turned to me and she said, when I get married, I'd really like to live in this area. And it was a beautiful area. She's pointing out the condominiums, and then she turned to me. She said, "Where would you like to live when you get married?" And I honestly don't remember. I just did not expect that. I don't remember what answer I gave. And then she asked, "How many children do you want to have?" I was just like, "Oh my goodness, it's like I'm not ready for any sort of conversation like this." I think I said 3. I don't remember. She said she wants to have 4. And I was thinking, oh Lord, I can barely take care of myself, and I can barely take care of myself. And in the world's such a wicked place. Charles Darwin said, what a book a devil's chaplain should write on the wasteful, blundering, cruel works of nature. And that not 7. Oh, I got a story about that. But before we go there, I was like, Lord, I wouldn't mind adopting. I mean, that's an honorable thing to do, to take care of children that have been, orphaned or whatever. That's a beautiful thing. But to bring a child into this world, it's such a scary place. And so that verse resonated with me. So Andrew Graham here was, by the way, I should say also greetings, Patrick Alexander. Oh, apologies here. Patrick Alexander's here. But anyway, to Andrew Graham's point, yeah, there was a young lady I'd been interested in when I was working on my 3rd degree, and I met her in college, and she, I don't know how, she was just talking. We were out in the cafeteria one day, and she was relating that she wanted to have as many kids as our pastor had. That pastor had 11 kids. At that point, I think my my interest shriveled real fast. She wanted 11 children, huge family. I'm like yeah. I don't think I could quite deal with that many headaches. But seriously, 18 years ago, my opinion, the other young lady that my tennis partner, we were driving around, and I really wanted, I loved her, but it just wasn't working. And then also at the time I'd taken, I'd lost the business. I wasn't bankrupt, but it's still kind of painful to lose the business. So I was working full time at MITRE, but then I had a business on the side that didn't succeed. And actually that's a good situation. That was a principle I was very grateful for, is that if you can start a business while you're still working, that's great. And I had enough time that I was able to have a business on the side, but it didn't succeed. And I was just devastated. Thank God I wasn't bankrupt. Just praise the Lord for that. And anyway, I take things hard. All right. If I don't like to lose, and losing a business just, it did something to my identity. And so I was at a low point, and I said, I'm not in any condition to be, I felt psychologically to be a husband and father. And, it just wasn't, I said, this isn't, she and I could be friends, and the next guy she meets will be her husband. And that's exactly what happened. A couple months later, my dad passed away. And for 18 years, I had been caring for my widowed mother. And especially the last 7, I was taking care of her 24/7. So the other verse I thought of is recently was 1 Corinthians 7:29-31. The appointed time is growing very short. From now on, let those who have wives live as though they had none, and those who mourn as though they were not mourning, and those who rejoice as they were not rejoicing, and those who buy as they had no goods, and those who deal with the world as though they had no dealings with it. For the present form of this world is passing away. And I was just praying. I said, oh Lord, I need to, please give me the courage to, oh gosh, a man isn't complete until he's married, and then he's finished. So, oh boy, we're going to have fun tonight. So, I should leave this comment up for a while. So this has been very sobering when I hear of all the events that are in Afghanistan. So it does break my heart. I can't think of, I think I've hoped and longed for happily ever after as much as anyone, maybe more so. And, maybe when I see where the world is going, I'm just like, oh Lord, those scriptures I just read are very sobering. And it's really hard to kind of tell yourself maybe things, maybe happily ever after on this planet and in this life is going to be hard to achieve. And it's like, well, what do we live for? And so this week I said, Lord, just this morning I said, please help me fight the good fight. Help me fight the good fight. So thank you for letting me share those scriptures with you. And, that was just some reflection on like the last 18 years of my life. I was thinking, yeah, it would have been nice to have what I dreamed for. But we live in a very challenging world. And it's just as well that I was able to care and provide love for my mother for 18 years. Especially the last 7, she just needed 24/7 care. And I was glad to be with her. It helped me repair my relationship with her because she and I are both very temperamental. I know it may sound surprising. I was actually closer to my dad, but when he passed, it was just me and Mom to take care of each other. So I have an announcement if you're wondering why I haven't been doing as many YouTube things is my life has gotten very busy, but especially now that I'm mobile and I'm not tied down to the house like I used to be, I'm actually getting to meet people in person and have in-person communication. And that's been really fun. And I've got to just travel and just get to have a little bit more of a life I hadn't known for such a long time. And then now with the job and business opportunities, I'm just not going to have as much time. I've also started exercising, trying to keep, just for my health, although every now and then I'll overdo it a little bit. I walked and ran 21 miles yesterday. It's actually quite doable if you don't run too much and instead walk at 3 miles an hour, and in about 7 hours you'll cover 21 miles. So just try not to hurt your knees or your ankles. And so I won't do that very often. My goal is one day to get up to 30. Now, in theory, I could get up, people could get up to 50 miles in a day. You'd have to really want it to get up to walking and running 50 miles a day. The world record for distance traveled, walked or ran in one day is 142 miles and 440, something like that. 142 and a quarter miles. It's just some insane number by Justy Castaneda. And I was wondering, how did he do it? And he actually walked, he didn't run. And I looked up kind of the physiological parameters. They said that walking is 75% more energy efficient than running. So he's actually very wise in managing his energy. So I have no illusions about ever that. By the way, that was the world record. I have no illusions of even trying to break that record. I mean, I would be happy if I could at least once in my life get up to 35 miles in one day. So we'll see. All this to say, I'm certainly going to miss you guys. This isn't goodbye. I probably will be doing a little bit more of my chemistry lectures. So yeah, I started falling when I started running, had to stop lest I break something. Yeah, so even though I was slow as molasses going uphill, oh wow, yeah, it's actually, yeah. I used to, even though I was slow as molasses going uphill, I used to be in high school in track, but that was really hard on the body. I was getting shin splints and all sorts of things. So even though walking isn't as intense, it's kind of just more satisfying also to know you can go distance. So rather than speed at this point in my life, I'm not going to try to overexert. It's hard on the body. So I'm just going to walk. I'm going to walk, jog a little bit. But by the way, Patrick, may the Lord give you healing. May the Lord give you healing in your body so that you can get back to exercising. Yeah. So I definitely, I think I would prefer to, if I had access to a warm swimming pool, that might be easier on, physically on, certainly the legs, it's easier. So, guys, I really don't know. I think I'd be lucky to get a Friday night in to do YouTube stuff. So I'm really going to miss you guys, and I've really just got to pursue both my job and my business opportunities, and it may free up time for me to then resume creation science at some point. So until it's my path is a little clearer, I won't be doing quite as much YouTube. So tonight is kind of special. It's a chance for me to just reach out to everybody and just let them know what's going on. So what's next on the docket? Sorry for my squeaky chair. That's terrible. I always like to show books that I've read in the past, and I go through the bookshelves. There's this one on suffering, Hind's Feet in High Places. It was a very comforting book. And it talked about suffering. So it's a classic in literature. So during the time of grief, that was one. When I was younger, I don't know that I would necessarily read it or even recommend it now. I saw another book, The Forgotten Spurgeon, but I haven't read this. I actually haven't read it. I just found it in my bookshelf. So now let me see if I can share my PowerPoint. See if I get it all queued up here. There were other books I found on my bookshelf. Yeah, The Dust of Death. Let me show it to you. This is by Os Guinness, and it was prophetic. I read it almost, 40 years ago. I read it 40 years ago. The Dust of Death by Os Guinness. It predicted kind of a lot of the breakdown of society. And this was written in the 1960s, very early. And he was predicting that as Christianity left the culture, we would have the breakdown in society. And it was amazing that his descriptions of how it would be with all the violence and anarchy, it read just like the headlines of Antifa and the BLM movement. Very powerful. Now, this was the Christian apologetics that I had at the time. It wasn't kind of like the evidential apologetics we have today. So this would be classified a little bit in the presuppositional apologetics. I think he argued the case very well that when Christianity is gone from the culture, that society would break down. And that's an apologetic of sorts, basically saying what good is atheism, that there are no answers. But it wasn't proof to me that that miracles happen and that Christ rose from the dead. But that was all I had back then. Since then, things have started to explode in the apologetics arena. And as I said last week, I got to see David Geisler, the son of Norm Geisler. They're giving a tribute to Norm Geisler. And I asked at that meeting, I said, is it your view that it seems to me that evidence for the Christian faith is stronger now than at any time in history? And he agreed. But anyway, this was apologetics back then. The other book in my collection, and I don't know, I read The Dust of Death cover to cover, and I normally don't read books cover to cover. This one was a 400-page read. There's Francis Schaeffer's Genesis in Space and Time. And I don't think I read that one cover to cover. I'm just pointing that out. So let's see. Next thing on the docket. Let me look that up. I think it's regarding McLean Bible Church. Oh, which reminds me, let me start the ticker here. One moment. Let me get the ticker going. There. So we have the evidenceandreasons.org website, which will be a good portal to archive things. It'll be a good portal to archive. Access my YouTube videos on my YouTube channel, because YouTube doesn't really organize my YouTube page very well. It doesn't really have the tools to present things in a nice hierarchical manner, whereas the website's more organized. So that website is still under construction, but it's better than what it was before. You can find things a little bit better. It highlights the videos that I consider that are better than others, let's put it that way. And then also at some point I can start linking out to both text articles and videos that I consider of good quality. So that's the evidenceandreasons.org website. I had gotten a lot of my subscriber base increased like 40% because of the coverage of McLean Bible. And I appreciate everyone that has subscribed to this channel because of their interest in McLean Bible, but that's not our normal programming. However, there is the SaveMcLeanBible.org website that gives the latest on what's going on there. Most of you know by now that McLean is going through a big upheaval. They had lost 40 to 60% of their congregation. And that's not just because of the pandemic. A lot of churches that were conservative actually grew during the pandemic because the churches that were more conservative and were actually resisting government efforts to shut them down, their congregations grew, because many of us felt that if liquor stores and abortion clinics are open, churches should be able to be open as well. So we felt here in Virginia that the pandemic was, used often as an excuse to shut down churches preferentially discriminate against churches when they're letting abortion clinics, liquor stores, and big, huge Black Lives protests be conducted with people not social distancing and just crowded together on the streets. Our David Platt of McLean Bible, while his church was shut down, encouraged people to attend a Black Lives Matter related rally, and that sent a message to the church, and a lot of people left. So here's Philip. Did you read that the new elders decided to break all ties with NBC and the SBC? That's not exactly, I read it on the McLean Bible page, but it's not all ties. It's not all ties, and until we see the signed paperwork, this could be just a temporary suspension of funds. They may say that. We've reanalyzed everything, and it's to be viewed with suspicion. I've been in discussion with people that are looking at this very closely. They may have broken ties with the Virginia SBC, the statewide, but they have not broken it with the national level. And so until we see the paperwork in hand, there's also nothing that's stopping them from resuming it. They may well break it, but we need to hear promises that they will not resume any ties in the future, which is, we need reassurances. So yes, I did, but let me share this though. From the McLeanBible.org website, you can click on there and you can get to the Facebook page. So there's a Facebook, and then there's the website. And the Facebook has kind of various commentary. It's a little less curated than the website, but let me just read this. Update on injunction filed with Fairfax County. Legal battle is taking stand on procedural irregularities and restore rights back to the MBC Constitution. We are in the discovery phase, preparing questions regarding the vote and enforcing of the Constitution. We will update as soon as we have more information. Keep praying for the truth to come out, for the elders to stand up for righteousness, for Pastor Dave to repent, resign, and seek restoration. So I would add this, that if indeed McLean breaks with the SBC, and I've been trying to say this, what really needs to be done is to repent of the woke gospel. Mike Kelsey had accused me from the pulpit of quoting him out of context, that his intended message was that, Christ is helping him not torture all white people. That was his intended message. My problem with really him saying it's difficult for him not to torch all white people, especially white evangelicals and Christians, is that from the pulpit, he is fomenting kind of this rage and accusation of white people in the present day. He gave kind of a not apology, in my opinion. If he were really sorry about what he said, he'd say, no, what he should have said is, I, Mike Kelsey, preach the false gospel. I repent of that. I should stop accusing white people of crimes that they're not guilty of. But he said, oh no, I'm really sorry I hurt you all. I'm sorry that you felt bad. I'm sorry you felt bad. To me, that's not a real apology. A real apology is saying, I was preaching the wrong gospel. And I could see that 40 to 60% of McLean Bible Church left because I preached the false gospel. that's a real apology. So you can see I'm getting a little incensed now. So there's more stuff with also potential financial issues, big issues, and I don't know what's going to happen. So I appreciate that Philip asked this, and I'm hoping someone will write my colleagues or someone will write a document that will address why this is very suspect. And what is concerning to me is that this is misleading. It's as if nothing was really done, but then they say things to placate, but they really don't do anything. There's something very suspicious about all this, okay? The other thing is, if they're saying they're breaking this partnership, they're admitting that they were partnered, and probably to a level that is not within the spirit of the Constitution. So they're saying, no, we're not affiliated, and yet they are. That they're members as much of the SBC as any of the other churches that are members of the SBC. It's not honest. So I'm not gonna belabor McLean anymore. And I really do want to express my sincere thanks to all of those who visited, particularly for McLean News. But I just, because there's a website there that'll cover it, savemcleanbible.org, and I will update it as I'm instructed to now. I've asked people to actually do the curating for me rather than me deciding on what the content would be. We're in the process of building a web communication team, and others will be making decisions on the content, because we have to be very careful about what's represented. You know, we want to have good information and then also send the right message. So in a few weeks, that, over the coming weeks, that website will be updated. At some point, we may actually open a second website that will be kind of more professionally handled to be able to release news. So I want to thank everyone that has been taking an interest in this, but that's not usually our regular programming. This channel is notoriously low drama and deals with the relationship of Christianity and molecular biophysics. So I'm going to go to the next item on the docket. So let's see here. Let me just so given that I'm starting to get very busy, I may be not able to join the 9 and 11 a.m. service regularly. And by the way, this is the lobby of McLean Bible Church. McLean is quite some distance from my house. They have an online, quote unquote, campus, an online campus. I may be spending time there so that I have a little more energy left. The other thing is that I am there are some confrontations happening here in the lobby, and I usually stand in the lobby right here. I'll show you guys right there, where that, yeah. So you can imagine me being right there before the 9 a.m. service, and then in between the 9 and 11 a.m. service, and then after the 11 a.m. service. So, but there were people coming up to me being very confrontational. And especially last week, a couple were screaming at me saying, "Why don't you leave? Why don't you leave?" So, it's not, I'm willing to stand up for what I feel is right. But as I said, given where I am at this point in life, I have to, I need to save up as much energy to take care of my busy schedule now. And I'm going to miss hanging out and doing things. But there was a cute thing that happened while I was at church this past Sunday. A couple approached me, and I actually saw the wife earlier in that same lobby here. I saw the wife. She was sitting right here on this bench right there. I don't know if you can see right here on this bench. She was sitting right there, and I passed by and I had to drop some trash there. And she's very well dressed. And then after the service, I believe it was the 9 a.m. service, she and her husband come up to me, and she says, I don't know if you remember me. And, she's attractive and very beautifully dressed, and she comes up to me afterward, and she said, I don't know if you remember me. And she said, I went to James Madison University. You took me flying. And I'm like, yes, I think I know who you are. Your sister's Becky. And so that made my day. She remembered me after all these years. How that happened is at the time I was working on my instrument rating, and I was at the flight school out there near James Madison University. And a lot of times we have to do what we call night currency anyway. You have to practice your landings and takeoffs. And usually I go out and fly anyway. And I knew this young, at the time this was 2005. So this is 16 years ago. At the time, she knew me from people at various churches in the Northern Virginia area. And one time I gave a talk at James Madison University, and she asked me if I could take her up flying one day. So I said, well, to be proper about this, we should be chaperoned. And so she brought her girlfriend along. So there I was, 2 girls. And it kind of brought back memories. I said, I have to look. See, I have this pilot's log, and it actually is a legal document, because if they want to, if the FAA, in case there's an accident or something, they want to inspect that you've been keeping your skill level up, what they call currency. And so I was looking through it, and let me see. This was, hang on, I can find it. There it was, September 14th, 2005. And then I took her sister and her friend on November 17th. And so that brought back old memories. And even today, as I was thinking about this, I said, yeah, I think I still remember I took them up from the Shenandoah Airport, SHD, and flew them out to Charlottesville. And I said, okay, can I even do the proper radio calls? And so it's like when you're coming in for landing, you have to announce yourself to the tower. And I think the proper call is to say something like, boy, it's been so long. Charlottesville Tower, November 66 Romeo, 5 miles northwest, landing with information X-ray, which is telling the tower my position. Oh, altitude 5,000 feet. So I was telling the tower I'm wanting to land. I'm telling them that I'm aware of the current weather information and my position. And then the tower will reply, November 66 Romeo, report midfield, report left midfield, downwind, runway 3. And then I would, which means that's telling me the runway I need to go to and the way I'm going to make my approach, set up my approach. And so when I'm close to the airport about to land, that's when I announce. So that's basically a landing clearance. And then I'm supposed to report midfield left traffic pattern downwind, November 66 Romeo. So November means it's the N number. N is November. 66 Romeo was the it's 66R. It's the name of the airplane. So Philip asked, no, I don't anymore. I actually flew one official Air Force mission in my life. I was a member of the United States Civil Air Patrol, which is an Air Force auxiliary. Now in World War II, they were part of the Air Force in a combat role. They would, because they had like 120,000 qualified pilots at the time in World War II and a lot of private airplanes, and they were short of combat airplanes. So they used the private airplanes to go patrol out in the sea, which is dangerous out there in the Atlantic, to look for U-boats, because that would kind of drive the U-boats. And they even had these, I don't know if they're hand-carried bombs, but they converted these general aviation airplanes to carry bombs so they could drop it on the U-boats. I mean, these are like 50-pound bombs, okay? They weren't heavy. And now you'd want the U-boat to start to try to submerge, because you wouldn't want them shooting at you. So some of the bombs were dropped as the U-boats were kind of submerged. And well, actually, I don't know that for a fact. Okay. They would have to be pretty daring to be taking on a U-boat that may have those multi-caliber, those heavy caliber machine guns shooting at you. But they did sink 2 confirmed, possibly 4 U-boats. And so you can just imagine the Civil Air Patrol just flying around the eastern coast, just keeping the U-boats from either shelling. They were shelling the shores, terrible stuff that they were doing. So that would at least drive them away, because seeing those airplanes there would identify their location. And then they also had some threat. Now, after World War II, the Civil Air Patrol became a non-combat. They were only involved in search and rescue. So I was not a uniform member of the Air Force, but a volunteer of an official Air Force auxiliary. So we get to fly Air Force search and rescue airplanes, which are propeller powered. And I had one search and rescue exercise. So I did have to, the Civil Air Patrol wears Air Force blues. I did have to show up in uniform, and I served as a scanner. That was an interesting, the scanner helps in the search and rescue. So you have the pilot, you have scanner, and there was an observer. I served as a scanner, and it was really funny because there were like 6 of us in the airplane. We were all pilots. And that was a lot of fun. I really miss doing that. So back to Philip's question, how did I get involved in that? As many of you know, I was in the aerospace. I was a junior scientist and then eventually a senior engineer in the aerospace and defense industry. My employer, MITRE Corporation, I worked at the Center for Advanced Aviation System Development. I was given the privilege, because they wanted their engineers to be pilots as well, as it helped in customer relations, even though we were a nonprofit. Our customers were the FAA and the aviation community. So we were a congressionally funded think tank, but to do our job well, we quote unquote had customers, and we served them by doing either research or a variety of other things, what we call relationship management. And so they sent me off to flight school. So that's how I got involved in it. That was a dream come true. And so anyway, um, it's been a long time since I've flown. So the last time I was up in the air was that my one and only official Air Force mission, and it was a privilege to serve on that flight crew. So I don't know if I'll do that again. My eyes aren't quite as good as they were, and I have a little bit of a left inner ear problem. So those are my memories from those days, and I was very flattered that this woman who came up, she remembered me from all those years back, and it's we just sort of lost touch. It was just like one of those where I said I'll just take her up, and I didn't really run into her very much, and I did get to her sister said, "Oh, that sounded like fun, take me up." So I took her and her friend up, and we flew down to Virginia Tech, and I don't know how we got to, someone picked us up or something. No, maybe I think I called a cab. I really don't remember. We got to some pizza place and we had pizza. Now, taking off, Blacksburg's kind of a dicey place, that airport. They have a mountain kind of right in front of the runway. And taking off at night was really scary. I said, "Oh, Lord, I hope I don't run into this mountain," because all I saw was this black in front of me. I said, "Okay, I hope there's enough separation and I can get enough altitude before I hit it." So I didn't, so I'm here. That being said, I'm just going to show a little picture here. I put the description in the video. There's this documentary called Density Altitude, and I'm a sucker for romantic movies. I know that's kind of girly for a guy, but that's the truth. I think this documentary is the Density Altitude's kind of the most romantic documentary. I just thought I'd say that. So the story is about this pilot who doesn't really understand the concept of density altitude. Density altitude deals with, your altimeter. Oh boy, now I'm embarrassed. The density of the air may not be really, you have your physical altitude, your altitude above sea level. But the air could be kind of thin for a variety of reasons, and you have to be really careful because on a hot day, the air's too thin. So I sadly had a colleague that I met just once when we were flying up in the air, and we were making radio calls to each other. He died. He was flying on a hot day, and his airplane couldn't get quite high enough, and he was a skilled pilot, but sometimes the ones that are skilled, meaning they can control the airplane, they're knowledgeable. Sometimes they don't allow enough margin of safety. So sometimes the pilot that's a little more timid and wants to fly in really extraordinarily good conditions might have a better track record. Well, his airplane couldn't get over the trees, and he was flying off an uncertified runway. If he were like 3 or 4 feet higher, he would have cleared the trees. He hit the trees, and his plane just went down and crashed. He and his co-pilot were dead. And that's one reason I'm not eager to fly. There are about 6 guys I know of in my flight schools that died, 3 plane crashes, and then 3 crews, which is 6 people. And you just get kind of spooked. And so they're nice memories. If I had the chance to fly again, I'd have to think about it. So anyway, how I got on that topic was, this is density altitude. And so this whole 30-minute movie is trying to teach the adventures of the husband here as he's learning to be flying, and understanding the concept of density altitude. And so he was flying in conditions where he barely got off the ground. And so, yeah, that was bad. That was bad. And But anyway, the actress was just really cute in that movie. So if you want to watch something like that, I put the link in the video description. So since this is a variety show, and I don't know if I'll have time to do another one of these. So like a lot of my variety shows, it's all over the map. The next one is on evolutionary psychology. And the book is by Dr. Helen Fisher, Why We Love, The Nature and Chemistry of Romantic Love. Let me see if I have a picture of, yes, Dr. Fisher. There she is. And you all know Dr. Dan. Dr. Fisher is Dr. Dan's colleague at Rutgers University, although Dr. Dan tells me he's never met Dr. Fisher personally. Dr. Fisher probably is just like a visiting professor, so she's probably not on the campus very often. So of any evolutionary, oh goodness, I use this as a bookmark. This is the logo for my employer 18 years ago. It was the Center for Advanced, that's the logo for the Center for Advanced Aviation Systems, MITRE Corporation. And it was in this book. And I'm just going to read a chapter from this book. A little bit about Dr. Fisher. She got married at a young age, and she got divorced after 6 months, and she spent the rest of her life trying to figure out the mystery of love. So that's how she became I call her the love doctor, how she became famous for understanding the nature of romantic love, where she spent the rest of her life trying to understand. I guess I can sort of understand that she's probably trying to understand what went wrong and how to make it right. And I hear she had since another life partner. I don't, she didn't reveal those details, but in one interview she did say, they were asking, how did you get interested in this? She said, well, she got married and then got divorced after 6 months. And that led her to studying the topic. So she did pioneering research on body language, trying to understand kind of the courtship rituals between men and women. And she began to try to notice how nonverbal communication, the interest. And she was a pioneer in that area. And then also using brain scans. I don't know if they were the PET or CAT or MRI scans, but she did a lot of that on the nature of love. So the brains of people in love, or when they're experiencing whatever, she would have brain scans of those, or those who had just been through a recent breakup. And you could actually see the differences in the scans, and she's very fascinated by that. So a lot of her pioneering work was in that. But I have a little anecdote here. And I mentioned that some people call this evolutionary psychology, but in my opinion, this is just plain old behavioral biology. You can actually describe it without appealing to evolutionary psychology. So like a lot of things in biology, sometimes the evolutionists will put, say it's evolutionary when it, really isn't. But anyway, she was talking about how in the animal kingdom you have, and we should notice this, you have many parallels in human beings. And I would assert that some of it doesn't even make sense from an evolutionary standpoint as far as common ancestry, because there are creatures that are not in the mammalian lineage that had to develop courtship rituals that seem to mirror things in the mammalian line. So we would call that a convergence. So like Dr. Fisher describes how even cockroaches, the male and female cockroach, would get close together and they'd start stroking each other's antennas. Okay, that, that kind of behavior would have to be either by common design, which I would believe it is, or by evolutionary convergence, which is, I reject, but it's at least closer to the truth than explained by common ancestry, because you would also have kind of that cuddling behavior among mammals. So anyway, I'll just read this here. Let me, I told you my eyesight's getting a little challenged now. In her groundbreaking book, The Hidden Life of Dogs, Elizabeth Marshall Thomas maintained that dogs show deep romantic passion for one another. She arrived at this conclusion moments after she introduced Misha, a handsome Siberian husky, to her daughter's young and beautiful dog of the same breed, Maria. Thomas had agreed to house Misha while his owners were on an extended trip to Europe. The day arrived. Misha's owners delivered this vibrant male to the Thomas home. Misha pranced into the living room to look about, settling his gaze immediately on the gorgeous Maria. In an instant, he bounded to her feet and skidded to a stop. At once, Thomas writes, Maria dropped to her elbows in an invitation to play. Chase me, her gesture said. And he did. Quickly, lightly, the two delighted creatures spun around the room. Misha and Maria were so taken with each other that they noticed nothing. Misha didn't even notice when his owners left. The two joyous dogs were immediately inseparable. Together they ate and slept and roamed. Together they bore 4 hardy pups. Together they reared them until the dark day when Misha's owners gave him away to people in the countryside. For weeks, Maria sat in the window seat of the Thomas home, in the very spot where she had watched her beloved Misha being forced into a car. Here she pined. Eventually she gave up waiting for him to return. But Maria never recovered from her loss, Thomas writes. She lost her radiance and showed no interest in forming a permanent bond with another male, even though over the years several eligible males joined our household. Oh, I'm sorry to end on such a sad note, but I mean, it just amazed me how God has this picture of romantic love in all species, and so the theme of male and female in love is deep within the fabric of creation. It's something very, very special in God's eyes and designed multiple ways. They actually think that the evolution of gender may have had, correct me if I'm wrong, anyone, may have had independent origins, multiple. So, but being a creationist and ID proponent, I think this is common design. God is sending a message, and it's something beautiful. And we see God use the metaphor of male and female, and particularly marriage, as something that describes the final state of the universe, where Jesus Christ spends eternity with his bride, the church. So then the picture of romantic love is a metaphor for something very, very glorious in the future. So let's see what else is on the docket. Oh, okay. I've got something silly here. Let me see. Female. Okay, this is almost like not too surprising. Let's see. This is from the Journal of Evolutionary Psychology. And greetings, Cheryl. Female mate choice is influenced by male sport participation. I'm sorry for the font here. I'll just read it aloud. So this is evolutionary theory. This is this is not, you know, I'd say, you know, we don't even need to include evolutionary theory to describe this, but anyway, it says sexual selection theory argues that females invest more heavily in reproduction than males, and thus tend to be choosier in terms of mate choice. Sport may provide a context within which females can gain information about male quality to inform this choice. Males may be able to display attractive traits such as athleticism, strength, and physique to females while participating in sport. We predicted that females would favor males that participated in team sports over individual sports and non-athletes because team sport athletes may be more likely to display qualities such as the ability to work well with others and role acceptance. Okay, like like I'm almost tempted to say like no duh that females are attracted to athletes. I don't think that that's particularly controversial or some big discovery. So anyway, oh, Andrew, greetings, sir. So for those who joined late, I haven't been on YouTube as much because I'm extremely busy. I have a job and 2 business prospects that I'm working on. If I really devote myself to this like I should work 120 hours a week, but I think I'd do well to even get up to 80. So I may not be able to do as many of these shows as I used to and as many as I'd like because I have just a ton of fun doing them. So next item on the docket. Oh boy, I think I didn't. Put this. Oh, okay. Let me get my books organized. Sorry about that. So now the next item on the docket is how I got a date using a strategy gleaned from this evolutionary psychology paper. And I'll show it to you. And it's really kind of funny. And they actually have a Wikipedia entry on this. It's called mate choice copying. Mate choice copying, or non-independent mate choice, occurs when a female of an animal species copies another fellow female's mate choice. In other words, non-independent mate choice is when a female's sexual preferences get socially inclined toward those of its fellow female. The behavior is speculated to be one of the driving forces of sexual selection and the evolution of male traits. It is also hypothesized that mate choice copying can induce speciation due to the selective pressure for certain preferred male qualities. Moreover, mate choice copying is one form of social learning in which animals behave differently depending on what they observe in their surrounding environment. In other words, the animals tend to process the social stimuli they receive by observing the behavior of their conspecifics and execute a similar behavior to what they observed. Mate choice copying has been found in a wide variety of species, including but not limited to invertebrates, like the common fruit fly, fish, such as guppies, and ocellated wrasse, birds like the black grouse, and mammals, such as the Norway rat, and humans. Most studies have focused on females, but male mate copying has also been found in sailfin mollies, Posilia latipina, and humans. Okay, so, and this relates a little bit to the term that I introduced here in the docket. I talked about female mate poaching. And this has been somewhat known that, and I've heard my guy friends mention this, as soon as they got a girlfriend, suddenly they'd start to be swarmed by other women. It's like, what's the deal? Is like, when they were single and looking, it seemed the women were hard to come by, and once they were seen dating someone, they suddenly got attracted. And definitely, which is kind of improper, when they got married, they definitely saw certain levels of attraction after they got married. And so there are various theories about this thing called mate poaching. And, there's mate poaching between, the men will poach and the females poach. Now, the thing about males going after another guy's girl, that's an extremely risky behavior because, as we see in the animal kingdom, that can lead to even mortal fights. So it seems that there's a little bit more in terms of I wouldn't say more, but one could see that there are not quite the same consequences in females poaching some other girl's guy. Now, the experimental evidence of this mate choice copying. See, I'm learning all these evolutionary psychology terms. Now, I wouldn't say that this has anything to do with evolution, since I reject evolution, but it is a correct observation. And so one of the papers, and I'll share it here, and I'll describe the experiment. And it is the title, it's a 1992 paper. This is probably one of the first big ones, and Proceedings of the Biological Society. Reversal of female mate choice by copying in the guppy. Reversal of female mate choice by copying in the guppy. Posilia reticulata. And basically, the way this experiment worked, and really, this is a tough conversation to have, why this phenomenon may happen, but I'll tell you why it is something to consider. What they did is they had two male guppies in an aquarium, and they're separated by a glass, like a transparent barrier. So they're basically, it's one aquarium that was partitioned into 3 spaces or so. They put a female guppy in the middle compartment, 2 male guppies on the left and right of her, so to speak. And they would observe how the female guppy behaved. And so you would have she would demonstrate which one she thought was more attractive. She would swim toward the attractive one. She would be trying to swim toward him and away from the less attractive one. Now, what they did then, they said, okay, that's kind of, if I get some of the details not quite right, this is at least the spirit of it. We have the paper here that gives it in more detail. But then what they would do is they'd run the experiment again, but then put a female in the compartment with the unattractive male. And so now there are 2 male fish in this aquarium and 2 female fish. So what they did is they force partnered this female fish to be with the unattractive male. So they experimentally established which one they thought was the unattractive male. They put the female fish in the unattractive male's compartment, and so you could see the 2 of them swimming around together. Well, guess who the female fish in the center started showing attraction to? She started going for the unattractive male that happened to be partnered. Now, does this I'm not saying that this is right, where, as Andrew Graham points out, you're off limits when you're married, but that's the attraction, I guess. Yes. Okay. I've heard many, many married people, and let's be brutally honest here. Just because they're married they don't stop being attracted to other people. I mean, um, uh, there have to be barriers put up to prevent infidelity. In the way you conduct yourself. So I'm just pointing out here, there's experimental evidence that the male's attractiveness can actually go up after he's married. He will be subject to some temptations there because basic biology, for whatever reason, is seeming to favor this. So, when I was in college, I said, there's a girl I kind of like. And, I said, well, maybe when I go to a party, I'm not going to go unescorted. So there was a girl in my, what was it now? I think it was abstract algebra. Yeah. My abstract algebra class, we were friends. And so there was kind of an end of the year party. And I said, let's go. I mean, we were just friends. She eventually ended up working for the FAA, and oh goodness, I was told I looked kind of young for my age, so I took a year off work to go back to college. But when I asked this young lady to escort me to this party, I was 40, and I think she was 23. She seemed not, to mind, and so I brought her to the party, and we had a great time. And I noticed there was a girl. She was really attractive. She was like the homecoming queen, runner-up at her college. She's really attractive, and we had something in common. But anyway, I talked to her in passing, but she was seeing me with this young woman as my guest, and I said, I think I probably have a better chance of going out with this other girl someday, because I brought this other female with me who, was she was much younger than I was. And so they say that at least if you have a female escort, that signals to others that, maybe you have something going for you, which I don't think I did. And so, me and my friend left the party that day, and it just so happened I went to another party with another female friend, and there I run into Miss Homecoming Queen again. And I got to talking with Miss Homecoming Queen, and I said, so you're a music major? I said, let me guess. I think you sound like a lyric soprano. And I said, I bet Puccini's your favorite composer. Her jaw dropped. Actually, that was the gambler in me, because I didn't know that. I just said, okay, she does have kind of a low voice, and I think she would like lyric sopranos would love singing Puccini. So I called it, So there's an old fighter pilot saying, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. I said I had nothing to lose by making that call. So we started talking about music, and I said, I play the piano. And she was just we just started talking music. I said, why don't we meet at George Mason? And, I didn't say we can make music together. I did not say that. I said we could, why don't we run through some numbers? And that's how we ended up going out. I I found out she was like only 20 years old, and just like, I didn't know she was that young. Anyway, she told me she liked older men, and we went out a few times, but I was rather surprised how she treated her boyfriends. I mean, she asked me to take her up flying, and I said, let's fly. You know, I took her from Whiskey 66, which was Warrenton Airport here, and I flew her out to Shenandoah. And after we landed, her boyfriend was calling her, just like, "Oh, you have a boyfriend." And she was trying to explain. She said, "Yeah, Salvador just landed me here in the airport, and we're going out to dinner." And just like, goodness, do you have to treat your boyfriends like that? I mean, it's like, okay, I get it. You're letting him know that she can have any guy she wants. I guess that's the game. You're going to keep him in line, right? And I'm like, oh boy. Anyway, but I said, I'm not going to think about it. So they have a courtesy car at the airports. If you fill up with gas, they provide it for the pilots. And I took her to, I wasn't able to take her to my favorite restaurant at Shenandoah. So this was in 2005. And so I brought her back. I felt so sorry for her boyfriend. Well, unsurprisingly, she broke up with him. I'm just like, yeah, if you keep treating him that way, what do you expect? And we did go back to the student union one night, and I said, let's go watch a movie. So this was like in 2005, and I suggested the movie Interrupted Melody, starring Glenn Ford and Eleanor Parker. Let me just double check that. Interrupted Melody. Yes, Eleanor Parker. Now, this is an opera. This was a story of an opera singer that had polio, and she was able to recover and fight through it. It is real tearjerker of a movie. Now, kind of the funny thing, when we were watching that movie, she just told me she broke up with her boyfriend. I was temporarily grounded from flying. You know, I had my day job as an aviation engineer, but I really, you know, my heart was in flying. I had, you know, I was grounded medically for a little bit, but that got cleared up. I may or may not be grounded now if I ever tried to fly, because I have a little bit of left inner ear problems. And anyway, it was really kind of funny. It was a tearjerker of a movie. I was bawling my eyes out because I was grounded. She was bawling her eyes out because she'd broken up with her boyfriend. So that was our first movie together. It was just funny. We were just crying for totally different reasons, because I was crying so hard because I was grounded. I just bawling my eyes out. It's like, maybe I'll never fly again, you know. Yeah. Anyway, I'm sorry. That was just totally random. But yes. So I think that's how I ended up getting to hang out with her, with this this reversal of female mate choice by copying in the guppy. And she probably thought she was poaching me away from the other ladies. Now that relationship never panned out. I didn't think I wanted to be through the ringer the way she was treating her boyfriend. So it's like, I'm not going to be your boyfriend. That's too scary. But I mean, I liked her. We hung out together, and we went to Atlantic City. So the first time that I ever threw money on the blackjack table, I took her with me, and we went out to dinner. That was really nice. Shortly, a few months thereafter, I said, "Hey, can I take you out for your birthday?" She said, "I just got engaged." Just like, and she said yes, and I said, "Okay, this be our goodbye." And yeah, I took her to Clyde's, which is one of the nice restaurants here. And there we were, just bawling our eyes out again, saying goodbye. So yeah, that was, yeah, did a lot of crying. You know, I cry easily. People that know me, and you know, I said, you know, I loved you. She said, yeah, it was so obvious. So, you know, I think people are probably a little more polyamorous in the sense they could be attracted to more than one person at a time, even though the lifestyle is immoral. I think it's very possible that people could be attracted to varying degrees to more than one individual. And I think that was certainly in her case. And there have been times I could say I was going out with one girl, but then also interested in another. It's really kind of just like, what am I going to do if I ever get married? There's going to be complications. So oh, this is very kind of you to say. So yeah, that was my episode with Miss Homecoming Queen. And then the other girl that I had talked about the most was my tennis partner. I still have the racket in my house that I used to bring with me when we go play. I don't think I have the heart yet to dispose of it, because there are a lot of nice memories with that tennis racket. I know that sounds totally silly, but that's true. So anyway, that's a little bit of evolutionary psychology. And I just wanted to say, you know, just because something has the title evolutionary psychology in it doesn't mean that it doesn't have a grain of more than a grain of truth about human nature. We learn a lot about our emotions by studying animals and how, you know, their courtship rituals and their the various courtship rituals. I mean, just like the peacock, it bothered Charles Darwin that the way peacocks relate to each other. Well, sorry, peafowls. The peacock is the male peafowl, and so the peacock, the way he tries to impress the ladies is he shows that big plumage, goes up in front of the lady, turns around and shakes his tail at her, and that's how she's impressed. So we could see kind of the same courtship rituals where the guy is trying to do something to always impress the ladies. That's just inherent. Okay, that just happens, and we see that in the animal kingdom. And so that's why I kind of like this book, Why We Love, by Helen Fisher. And I also put in the video, I put in the video description a TED Talk, 15-minute TED Talk by Dr. Fisher. So what I have said is we live in a fallen world, but the picture of romance was a romance between Adam and Eve that was meant to last forever. But that points to there's only one romance that's going to last forever. That's between Jesus Christ and his bride, the church. The human husband and wife thing, as Jesus said, in the resurrection, they'll be like the angels. They neither marry or are given in marriage. But that doesn't mean that romance dies. There's only one romance that goes on forever. That's Christ and his bride, as described in Revelation. And it's just interesting that God would use that metaphor that is so very tender and intimate to describe that relationship. So I believe that what Helen Fisher describes is in terms of pure biochemistry. This is describing something of divine origin. So what she is trying to say is that if you look at a beautiful painting and you might be describing the colors, there's still a deeper meaning than just the raw chemicals. I'm paraphrasing a little bit of what she said. So even though we can decompose a lot of human relationships in terms of biology and chemicals, it's just like a painting. It's more than just the chemistry and chemicals, if you know what I mean. There's a deeper meaning and significance to it. And it portrays something of a deeper significance than just the chemicals in the biology. And that's why reading Helen Fisher, even though she's describing it in terms of interactions, when I was like describing the puppies that were, the dogs that were falling in love with each other, and they had a lot of interest, I said that's a picture of something more beautiful than just kind of like raw attraction. I said this is something symbolic, and marriage is something very, very sacred in Christian doctrine. And you hear this through the Bible where God's describing his relationship to Israel like a husband to a wife. Yes. Shows how passionate God is. He wants to be longed for and chased as far as how I understand the word. Yes. And sometimes passages in the Bible are really graphic, and I'm not going to read it because it is too... some translators have had to like moderate the language because it was too graphic. And I think... oh boy. Let me make sure this is it. Oh yeah, Ezekiel had this. Ezekiel, like chapter 23 is one of them. And then there were other ones, other passages in Ezekiel. Depending on the translation, you could get some really graphic language of like a husband that was just deeply betrayed, and God is describing like the adulterous man in terms of his anatomy. Okay, it was really graphic. Okay, I'm not going to go there, but I was just astonished that the Lord would use language of like a husband that was betrayed by a woman, by his wife, and it's describing what thoughts a man would be thinking. And it says in the Song of Solomon, the jealousy, a man's jealousy for his love, that's from the Lord. I found that language very interesting because that's like describing the jealousy of God when someone goes after, pursues other gods than the one true God. And we also see in the animal world where they're harems, in the male is very protective, and you see that rage and jealousy, but it's with humans, the jealousy of the husband for his wife, just very powerful. And so anyway, my point is, even though the evolutionary interpretation could be, well, since we see animals have this, we must be related by common ancestry. But the scientific evidence for me is that common ancestry would, one, require miracles for it to take place. Therefore, even if one accepts common ancestry, one would have to accept that God, a miraculous power, had to make it possible. The stronger statement, which is a little harder to defend, is that there's no common ancestry at all. The world is young. There's no common ancestry among the major groups. So we can either interpret it as evidence of common ancestry, or, as I said, it's rejected on a scientific basis, that this is a picture, this is a design by God. Human male and female relationships, both their courtship and in the heartbreak, are pictures and metaphors that God uses throughout the Bible. It's just very powerful. If you read Ezekiel, it's just astonishing. And I've had guy friends that have had their wives went astray, and it's just devastating. And when you read through Ezekiel, it's like I can't, God is using the emotions of a betrayed husband in such clear and graphic language, and you could just feel the sense. You just really feel the grief. It's anyway, and I don't. The point is, I don't think that's accidental. I think God designed all the richness of romantic love and all its consequences, like the grief and betrayal and loss, etc., etc. That is not an accident. That is not an accident. And it is the picture that God uses to teach us lessons. And I remember I was talking to a husband that said his wife ran off. And I said, brother, I really feel for you. But, it's hard to give words of comfort. And I said, brother, God gives us pictures of how he feels betrayed. I said, when we sin against God, he feels betrayed like that, like what you feel now. And that kind of changed his perspective. He said, yeah, if that's how the Lord feels, when I, am when he's unfaithful toward the Lord in the way he lives his life, he said it really must hurt the Lord a lot when his people are unfaithful, because he said, this hurts a lot that my wife is doing this to me. And I don't know where that relationship ended up, but he began to have a heart of forgiveness, because he said, yeah, look how much God has forgiven me. And he began to have more forgiveness for his wife. So that's, if people wonder how I have studied evolutionary biology and all, I kind of laugh. I said, it's amazing. I study about God's creation and design from atheists and evolutionary biologists, because when Dr. Sanford sent me off to school, he said, I want you to go to the best schools under the best professors. A lot of them were not creationists for sure. Probably a lot of them were not believers. And Janet says here, right before I was saved, I sensed that God was saying that I was chasing romance while he was chasing and longing for me. It broke my heart, and I surrendered and never regretted it. Yes, beautiful testimony. I seem to recall that, Janet, you got saved in college around that time. Praise the Lord for that. So let's see what else is on the docket. So, this is how what I've done is to kind of relate my studies in evolution, which is not a godly, in my opinion, intended to be a godly description of human behaviors. But then in the process of reading it, I could see, well, I reject universal common ancestry and that this is natural. I accept they're describing common design. And in the process of studying kind of this godless literature, which I have to, this is, if I'm going to learn about God's creation, the best place to learn it is in secular studies. And yes, God can do things to help you see and transform what was intended for evil to something that was good. Because I've had to do a lot of that, having to study kind of evolutionary literature so I can refute it. But in the process, you see something also beautiful in how biology is miraculously created and how it's designed and how it testifies of things in the Bible. Because otherwise, I don't think I could stand my secular studies at all. I will also now talk about May to December attractions. And this is interesting from a standpoint of natural selection. And I only confirmed these numbers recently. This is a picture of Gary Cooper and Grace Kelly in the movie High Noon. And it is one of the most beloved Westerns in all the movies. Let me see another picture here. I kind of like this picture more. And goodness, Gary Cooper was 50 years old in that movie, and Grace Kelly was 21. A 29-year age gap. Yes, this is incredible. See, Janet picks this up right away. It's a beautiful movie, and it is a beautiful picture. I mean, if I might have to admit something here, because I was in May, we call that May to December, where the man is much older than the young woman. And I recently covered the thing about Paula Broadwell, who was mate poaching her much older. That was a totally immoral relationship. Okay, I'm not sanctioning that. Yes, 29 years old. It's 29, really more like 28, 28 and a half. Gary Cooper was born in 1901, and then Grace Kelly sometime thereafter, like 1929. So it really wasn't quite, it's right around that time. Maybe I would say more like 28 years. Yes, 20. And Donald Trump, Melania Trump are 25-year age gap. So why does this happen? From a biological perspective, and the evolutionists will say this is evolutionary, I'd say it's biological. One thing is that childbearing age. So women in their childbearing age, there are cues that say, okay, she's of childbearing age. And so I think that's one reason, at least from a male standpoint. Yeah. Oh goodness, there's a picture of Melania and Ivanka standing beside Donald Trump when they're both younger. They're about the same age. Yes. So this one's 29. But you know what? I'll tell you what. At the time when people saw this movie, the producers were a little bit concerned about the age gap, but no one noticed it. Hardly anyone. See, now that I'm bringing to your attention, you might notice it now and like, oh, wow. But when we watched this movie, it was very touching, very touching. And so, and I was thinking, why is that? And why do we hear about kind of the infidelity of males going after for the younger? That's a biological imperative. Now, see, we live in a fallen world where women weren't meant to grow old and die. Think about it. You see, now that we're in the fallen, okay, in the Garden of Eden, what was God's first command? To be fruitful and multiply. It was really easy in the Garden of Eden. You weren't burdened with all the difficulties of living in a fallen world. His first command was he puts Adam and Eve in this beautiful paradise. Okay, Adam wakes from his sleep and there's Eve, okay, waiting for him. And he, in the Hebrew it says, the way he said, flesh of my flesh. The grammar says that it's like he's saying, wow. Wow. And so he's king of the world. He's in this paradise. And the Bible makes great pains, and I'm embarrassed to even talk about it. that they weren't wearing anything. Okay, so he's king of the world in this paradise, and there's this woman not wearing anything. First command God gives is be fruitful and multiply. In the Garden of Eden, everything was designed perfectly, and it wasn't hard to follow the Lord's commands. It wasn't hard to follow the Lord's commands. And as I gave in my talk last week, they wanted to be God. I don't think, this is my speculation, it wasn't so much biting into that forbidden fruit. It was the fact that they were rebelling against God and wanting to be God, because when the devil told them you'll be like God, they chased after it. And the devil was very deceptive. In a sense, they'd be like God, as God himself said, knowing good from evil, but the devil was insinuating what we call equivocation, that they would be all powerful. That was very offensive to God. And so God gave them all that, and they turned. So now we have a situation in the fallen world where there's aging now. I've covered before in terms of biology that we have evidence of creatures, that animals that can live forever, like the hydra, and then also bacteria, if they're not killed, can live forever. They're immortal. And the hydra is immortal. It doesn't age. And it's been a mystery in evolutionary biology why we age at all. And of course, the Christians, the creationists, would say, well, that wasn't meant to be. The sting of death wasn't supposed to be there. We weren't supposed to be aging. We have little evidences of this, because there are immortalized human cell lines that, like the most famous one we extracted from a woman dying of ovarian cancer. She died, but her cells still live on to this day and used a lot in experiments. And right away I said, you see, we were meant to live forever. We have traces of this, of Eden, still in our in our biology. So this May to December thing, it really, at least for the guy, it was meant to reflect the original design, but he has to fight that temptation. And it can be difficult, That explains it going from the man to the woman. I think the woman being attracted to the older man is harder to explain. And according to like what they call selection theory, is that, well, guys don't live quite as long as women, and they also die. They have a higher incidence of death at, even before age 20. So just the fact that the guy is older indicates to the woman he's more fit, just from an averages standpoint. So I can't really explain the May to December attraction as far as females to males. Now, statistics have studied this. They said it's about 15% where women would be very attractive to men that are much older. Now, there was one girl who told me, she said, it's really scary. She's still attracted to Sean Connery. This was some years ago when he was about 60, and she was like someone in her 20s. She said, that's really scary. I still, she's still really attracted to him, this movie star. So I don't quite know how that happens. Yeah, I don't know. And so I was, yeah. I guess the reason I talk about it is that, before my father passed, I was in that situation, and God just had other plans for me. I had, it didn't work out. My May to December relationship didn't work out. And that was in God's design, because I went on to take care of my mother where I was really needed and where I felt my skill sets were well matched. I don't think I could have been a good husband and father. I think it's like, I don't know how a husband and father, he has to divide his attentions between his wife and the kids. And I'm like, if when you love someone, you just want to give them like 10 times more than is humanly capable. And then if your attention has to be divided between your kids and your wife, it's like, how can you already want to give so much and you can't possibly. So it worked out better that I had one person to care for the last 18 years. I could handle that psychologically, because I think it would have torn me apart trying to give even more of myself to more people. That's just the way I'm wired. So the next thing on the docket. See, I tend to save the worst for last. I start with the scandalous and then the boring stuff. So the next topic is mathematical finance. And since it's the worst for last, I probably won't belabor it. So there is, let me bring up let me try to figure a way to make this a little more interesting. Yeah, mathematical finance. There's this book, When Genius Failed, and I have the book here, When Genius Failed. The Rise and Fall of Long-Term Capital Management by Roger Lowenstein. And he talked about the Black-Scholes-Merton equation, which relates thermodynamics, and you know how much I like thermodynamics, with options pricing, stock market and futures options pricing. They won the Nobel Prize in economics for this. Let me see if I have a picture of the Black-Scholes equation. It's a differential equation. And technically, let me see. Technically, there it is. I'm going to show the formula. This is Nobel Prize winning territory here. They called this like the discovery equivalent in the economics and finance world. This was considered like the discovery of DNA. So I'm going to show it. Hang on. Oh, God bless. You missed all the fun stuff. W.H. McCord, we were talking about McLean Bible and all sorts of other things. So this is the Black-Scholes equation. Let me see. Well, this is the development of it. That's the probability density function. I'm sorry. Let's see if they actually have it. Yep, there's the Black-Scholes equation. And the formula, there it is. That's Nobel Prize winning work, ladies and gentlemen. Fabulous minds. That won the Nobel Prize. And let me see if they have alternative formulations. Now, I actually programmed this into a computer. How does this relate to anything else? Well, as some of you know, I played a lot in the casinos, even when I was an engineer at the MITRE Corporation in their aviation division on the weekends. Or in my spare time, I spent a year learning how to count cards. And yeah, boy, my last few years at MITRE, I played the piano and I was flying airplanes and learning how to count cards and having my day job and doing intelligent design. Yeah, my life was, I was pulled in a lot of directions. So like when I shared that article when I was on the cover of Nature, that was 2004. Shortly thereafter, I was learning how to fly. Yeah. I had already gotten my pilot's license at that point, and I was flying around. And shortly thereafter, I started studying how to count cards. And in April 2nd, my first time at a casino, April 2nd, 2005, I started playing in a casino. I took that young lady there that I talked about earlier. The two of us were bawling out our eyes when we were watching the movie Interrupted Melody. Went to Atlantic City, and I wish I remembered the name of I think it was the Hilton Casino. And prior to that, I was studying the Black-Scholes equation. But in the circles of professional blackjack players, there's a lot of academics. So like my mentor was actually a professor of mathematics. In fact, I think I may even have a picture of him. One of my mentors, let's see, Michael, oh yeah, here it is. I have a picture of, do I have a picture of him? Well, before I show his picture, he has a Wikipedia entry. R. Michael Conjar. Robert Mike Conjar was a professor in the Department of Mathematics and Computer Science at University of Detroit, Mercy. And he became the chairman several universities. And you can see here, using the nom de plume of math professor Mike Conjar, was a regular contributor to various websites dedicated to the study of casino games and advantage play, most often to Stanford Wong's Blackjack website, where he won a record 16 times the award of Post of the Month. And so it mentions Stanford Wong, and I had the privilege of meeting these gentlemen. Math professor passed away, but anyway, I have Stanford Wong in his book Blackjack Secrets. So a little bit story about my mentor, Michael Conjar. Let me see if I could show a picture. Yeah, there he is, giving a math lecture there. It's kind of cute. He considers himself a non-professional gambler. Professor is more of his skill. But that being said, he won $250,000 playing blackjack before he got kicked out of all the casinos. When he passed away of cancer, I think he left $50,000 for his wife of his winnings, and then the about $200,000 he gave to charity, because he was a Catholic. He is a professor at a Catholic university. And so there were other people that I met in this kind of quasi-secret society of skilled gamblers. One of them were the Holy Rollers. Now, some people think because I'm in the credits of the movie Holy Rollers, which is about card counting Christians, that I was a member of the team. I was not. I was just listed in the credits as I had contributed to the development of their documentary. But I met other people, and let me see if one of them was Don Schlesinger. See if I could show his picture here. I'm surprised. This is Don Schlesinger here. He was a Wall Street executive for Morgan Stanley Securities, Wall Street firm. He invited me up to New York and in Manhattan, and he taught me some aspects of that Black-Scholes equation. And he actually was a very skilled derivatives trader. Now, this is really funny. The funny story about Don Schlesinger is he was a high school teacher, but he was just, I mean, he was brilliant. He could have been, you know, just like one of those people that you kind of knew that he wasn't going to just spend the rest of his life as a high school teacher. He really was very brilliant. Well, Wall Street executives noticed his books on blackjack, were very fascinated. And he he got interviewed by Wall Street executives, and they said, well, we want to hire you. You have the right temperament, because his math skills and understanding the casino, they said, we want you there. So he was an executive in their options trading department, and he kind of took me under, he took a liking to me. He invited me. He said, I'll teach you a little bit. And he gave me, I said, well, what would you recommend? How did you learn your craft? And he said, actually, it's really funny. He said, I just banged away at the calculator with the Black-Scholes equation for 2 weeks. And I said, I found some things about the normal distribution. And he said, you're exactly right about the normal distribution and how it's structured. And I began reading this. So that's how I got interested in securities trading. And so when I showed, let me see if I have that. Did I delete it? Oh, bummer. So when I showed that crazy looking formula of the Black-Scholes equation, that's what he studied. And so this was all related to, it's really funny because people ask me, well, why did you start studying? My professor at physics when I was at Johns Hopkins, he asked, well, what do you do? I said, well, I'm interested in finance, because at that time I was no longer at MITRE, and I was kind of looking to get into the hedge fund industry, actually, because of Don Schlesinger. And he said, oh yeah, I'm interested in finance. He said, what are you doing here? I said, a lot of physicists end up on Wall Street. That's where I really wanted to go. But also really the other reason was I wanted to work on the young Earth creation distant starlight problem. So it's a really interesting world in blackjack. You have the card counting Christians who were elders of churches, and then you have Wall Street executives. It was just a wild world. That's the wild world of mathematical finance. Now, I'm going to relate to some more interesting personalities. There is, so this book, When Genius Failed, do I have it here? Right here. When Genius Failed was about the Black-Scholes equation. And what ended up happening is the Nobel Prize winners the Nobel Prize winners joined this organization called Long-Term Capital Management. They managed to raise a few billion dollars for their hedge fund, but they were leveraged by a factor of like 50. It was just insane, which means, you may have only 2 billion in assets, but they borrowed like $100 billion in terms of, they could structure it in terms of financial derivatives. And we nearly saw that blow up in 2008, but there was an equally, on a smaller scale, at the time, it was the biggest potential meltdown. They could have undone, just that one firm could have just destroyed the financial world of all these countries. It was, it was like a nuclear bomb going off. It was so close to it. What happened in 2008, the bomb actually went off, and we had this tremendous economic meltdown where it turned out $600 trillion in derivatives. Now, if that number sounds like outrageous, it's because it is. There's not that much gross domestic product in the entire world per year. But you have all these, the way the finances work, and they borrow, one guy borrows from another and another guy borrows from him and so forth. It just explodes. So these Nobel Prize winners joined this firm. They said, you guys are too leveraged, but they got overruled. And that's what that book was about, because Guiness failed. There were enough hiccups. Their model was an idealization, but reality was just ever so slightly different than their mathematical models. And when there was a hiccup, it just blew apart their hedge fund. But then the hedge fund was so tied into all these banks that when they blew up, the fire was starting to spread, and the banks were at the risk of becoming insolvent. Just a very compelling drama. So that's the Black-Scholes equation, and kind of my fascination with that. So that was the book, When Genius Failed. And then there's another book. I don't have a picture of it. It's called Fortune's Formula. Maybe I do. Let's see if I have it. There it is. Fortune's Formula is actually is also a comparably interesting book that talks about Wall Street and casinos. So Fortune's Formula, the untold story of the scientific betting system that beat the casinos in Wall Street. The scientific betting system that beat the casinos in Wall Street. It does relate a little bit to that Black-Scholes equation that has the thermodynamics in it and the finance. But there are other things that deal with information theory. So we know that in the ID arguments, there's a lot of stuff with information theory, which I say we shouldn't really use for intelligent design. But information theory and thermodynamics actually apply very well to Wall Street, which is kind of the big casino. And there are other things in risk management that some really brilliant scientists developed, and that was Fortune's Formula. So that's why people are able to, they recruit some really interesting talent from physicists and mathematicians that end up being on Wall Street. And they borrow a lot of stuff from thermodynamics and who knows what else. But the hero of this book is Edward Oakley Thorpe. And so there's a picture of Ed Thorpe there. And he was an MIT professor of mathematics, very brilliant. And he published this paper, and I have it here. Of all places, it's at the NIH archive. The NIH has archives of all sorts of things. And the name of the publication is A Favorable Strategy for 21. So this is a peer-reviewed scientific journal. This is like one of the top three. Probably number one and number two are the prestigious scientific journal Nature and the prestigious scientific journal Science. Those are the two big ones. Kind of a distant third would be Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, PNAS. And so here's this math professor from MIT. He publishes an article in a prestigious scientific journal on how to play blackjack and a way to beat the game. So this is an interesting development. When he published this, the casinos were really upset. And at the time, the mob was running the casinos, and Dr. Thorpe was under threat from the mob to have his legs broken. And, you know, a lot of the casino mobsters were considering taking a contract out on him for figuring out how to break that game. But it had an interesting effect. Because the game was beatable, people tried to learn how to count cards. They wouldn't be prepared. They go to the casinos. Suddenly, this obscure game began to be a big interest. And only a few people could actually have the skill to do this. And so what ended up happening is because the game was beatable, it actually made the game explode. And it became very, very popular. The casinos made a killing off of this because it was beatable. What they found that they could do is they would eventually identify who the card counters were and just exclude them from the casino. And there are various number of ways to do that. Like in Atlantic City, they can't physically kick you out like they can in Las Vegas. They have other countermeasures that they call half shoeing and, you know, shuffle ups. That means when the card counter is trying, you know, the bet is favorable and he indicates it by pushing out large amounts of money, they'll just stop dealing cards to him and just reshuffle the deck, or what they call half shoeing, which is similar. They don't deal out all the cards. They'll only deal out a small fraction of the cards. So let me think. I haven't been shuffled up on. I've been half shoed. I've been backed off, which they just say, you know, they back you off. They'll just won't let you bet. They don't throw you out of the casino. Backed off. I've been back roomed, where the security takes you to the back room, tries to intimidate you. I've been 86, where I've been trespassed. You can't come back into the casino, otherwise they'll send you to jail. So I haven't been shuffled up. I've been half shoed, backed off, back roomed, and 86th, banned. So those are kind of my badges of honor, so to speak. But anyway, so what happens to Dr. Thorpe is a very interesting story. Now, he spent a year trying to solve this mathematical problem. He was using high-speed computers because the math was too hard to do analytically. He had to use computers, and his wife was relating how he was spending a lot of late nights at the MIT campus working on this problem. Now, his associate, Claude Shannon, developed information theory, and from where we get the word bit. So these are two mathematical geniuses. Shannon became famous and a revered professor because the internet became feasible because of Shannon. So there's Shannon and Thorpe. They built the first wearable computer that could analyze the roulette games in terms of the physics, and they were going to actually be able to beat the roulette game. But then the roulette game, their computer broke down, so they weren't able to have a successful use of it. But Thorpe did well in Las Vegas, but he finally quit. Even though, you know, while he was a professor, he'd fly out to Las Vegas. He finally quit when he thought he was slipped poison, and he said, "This is too much." So that there's an interesting show on the History Channel called Professor Blackjack. It talks about that. That was a very interesting episode. Yes, Maxwell Smart, Agent 86. What they mean when they say 86 from a casino, that means you're banned. That means you're done for. So there's a picture of Professor Thorpe here. Now, the interesting thing is he expanded his math abilities and he became the most successful hedge fund manager at the time. He wrote the book Beat the Dealer, which talked about how to beat the casinos with blackjack. But then he went on to write this book, Beat the Market, a Scientific Stock Market System. And it actually worked. What he did is what they call arbitrage. You don't try to predict the direction of the market. You find ways you can bet on both sides of the market. It had to do something with an obscure security called stock market warrants. So you'd buy the security or you'd short it and then you'd actually buy the warrant, something like that. You actually played both sides of the war. It's almost like an arms dealer supplying arms to both sides of an armed conflict. He's very smart. And now, for many of those who would be interested in this, that play became so good that the people who created those securities kind of eliminated that play, so you couldn't take advantage of it. So that this worked for a while until the other side said, "Hey, we don't want to let you guys make money this way." So that was a game that was effectively canceled. But that was like that was very novel. And why would he publish something like this? Well, I'm speculating at this point that he was kind of advertising his skill, and he was soliciting investors because he eventually became a very successful hedge fund manager. He is one of the best, really one of the best, one of the more honest ones too. What's his name? Yeah, Jeffrey Epstein kind of gave hedge fund managers a really bad reputation. But Ed Thorpe, independently, he figured out how to beat the casinos with blackjack, and then how to beat the markets with all sorts of things. He independently figured out that complex formula, the Black-Scholes equation, that unifies mathematical finance with thermodynamics or heat flow. He should have won the Nobel Prize, but people said, well, he was better off being secret about it because he won in the markets. And the Nobel Prize winners ended up going bankrupt, which is sad. Oh, well. So let's see. Yes. So that was about Edward Thorpe. He was the hero of William Poundstone's Fortune's Formula. And I'm actually not going to go 4 hours tonight. So for those of you who joined late, I was kind of making an announcement. One reason I haven't been doing so many YouTubes, and also probably also in the future, I'm sad to say, because I've had so much fun. I've gotten very much busier. I have a job and 2 business opportunities. So I should be trying to work 120 hours a week. I probably will only manage, I'd be glad to manage 60 to 80 hours. We'll see. And that means I won't have as much time for these sort of YouTube videos and doing intelligent design. Maybe someday I'd love to be able to resume in this space. I just can't at this point. You may see my chemistry lectures. You may see my chemistry lectures, and you may see my chemistry lectures. I may be at least doing that. So the last thing I'll talk about is, well, let me just say this. One of my business opportunities is in mathematical finance. And that's where I really want to, I promised my mother when she was alive that I wouldn't delve into that because that kind of scared her. But, the irony is she never worried about me playing the casino. She said, yeah, I trust your math, Sal. Most mothers would be horrified if their children went off into the casino. She said that she didn't worry about me. She only worried in case what the casinos might do to me. So that's one of the business opportunities. We'll just see where that goes. And then what else? Cybernetics is the last topic. This is by Maxwell Maltz. I would say he's a liberal Christian. I'm sorry, Maxwell Maltz. So he did this whole thing with visualization, And I found that very helpful. His interesting story was he's a plastic surgeon, and he was relating how physical appearance can affect your performance as a human being. Now, he dealt with some really serious cases. Like there's one time a salesman was terribly disfigured in a car accident, and he lost his, he felt very self-conscious about, interacting with customers because he was so badly disfigured. Now he had facial reconstruction, and he was able to get back to his job, and he did very well. He also treated a young man that had a terrible birth defect, and he had a lot of criminal tendencies and all, but after his face was repaired, he was able to interact, and his life was totally transformed. I mean, it really is kind of sad that, society tends to be kind of xenophobic to people with severe deformities. I guess that's just human nature, and it makes the interactions difficult. Now, the thing that really was compelling by Maxwell Maltz here, and by the way, I said he's a liberal Christian. That is me saying I don't agree with a lot of his, kind of different interpretations of the gospel, but he does mention Jesus a lot, which is beautiful here. He had a very optimistic viewpoint of life. And it's funny because this is on the same bookshelf that had a book on postmillennialism. The postmillennialists are like, when Christianity came here, the world will get better and better and better, and then Christ will return. The premillennialist view is the gospel will spread, but at some point the Antichrist will come physically, reign over a one world government, and the world will be awful. Then the Lord returns. So Maxwell Maltz had a very optimistic viewpoint. Just, he's a lovely man, but he had a liberal take on Christianity. And the interesting thing that compelled him, so I was talking about his successful plastic surgeries. He had one case, and unfortunately it's not in his book, but it is in either his other writings or one of his cassette, one of the archive talks. He had been treating a woman who was in a car accident, lovely girl. After he healed the scar, she still had emotional scars. She was still feeling disfigured when she was whole. And he had to treat a lot of patients. He had to treat a lot of patients that had emotional scars even after they had been physically restored. And I can, I get that, and so I'm going to extrapolate a little bit because I think sometimes his language is a little too optimistic, but he was saying that there are a lot of times that we're hindered internally because I think one of the best things he said is we're not defined by our mistakes. We're not defined by our mistakes. That's a paraphrase. And so people are carrying around these emotional scars, and they're really more capable than the way that they're living their life. And, I related some about 20 years ago, I'd lost, even though I was working for MITRE, I had a side business. The side business failed. That kind of defined who I was. I just couldn't, a lot of my relationships were difficult because of that. So even though people liked me and they treated me with admiration, I felt like just a disaster inside. And it took a long time. It's taken years to kind of to work through that. Probably one of my favorite passages in the Bible is the thief on the cross. It's like, yeah, you could have totally blown your life but Jesus will redeem all of that. It's like, you totally blew it. You're there on the cross, and all you could do is ask the Lord for mercy and then just die. And just like, that is that's my favorite passage. It's like, we're not defined. Our eternal destiny is not defined by our mistakes. It's defined by our relationship with Jesus. And I've had to kind of hold on to that and say, okay, Sal, you're not defined. I have a tendency to be very hard on myself. I'm just at that temperament. And I have to keep saying, Sal, you're not defined by where you've messed up or the wrong notes you've hit. You're defined by who you are in Jesus. And however you succeed in life, it's in him anyway. It's by his grace, and to God be the glory for everything. And so this book was very helpful, because I got to the point where I could be so down I couldn't, it was just hard to do just kind of the necessary things of life, like say go to the grocery store, or go to the department store to take care of things you need to. And one interesting thing he said, there's obviously a lot of emotional stuff going on that that's hindering you. And what he said is, okay, just try to relax. Now just imagine yourself doing that task. So like when I wanted to exercise, I said, oh, okay, it's really hard for me to exercise. Something simple, that you knew was probably going to be good for you. So now just imagine, close your eyes, imagine yourself doing the task you had to do. So I closed my eyes. I'd imagine myself going to the store to buy my pair of running shoes. Then I imagined myself putting my running shoes on and then stretching out. I kept doing that, and I said, after a while, I stopped feeling the anxiety. He said, okay, once you can imagine yourself doing these tasks and you're no longer anxious, then you're going to be able to do it. And I found that was really, really helpful. So a lot of athletes will do a lot of this visualization exercise, and that really helped me a lot. And that's why I was kind of glad to see this book, to see it on the book stand. So I'm now going to say goodnight. Let me just look and say hi to everyone. Dr. Dan here joined us earlier, and Andrew Graham, Ray Giordano, Patrick Alexander, Philip M. Math Pig, greetings. Crawdad. Oh, thank you. We were talking earlier about McLean Bible Church. And Cheryl is here. And Janet. I'm going to really miss you guys. I can't thank you guys enough for being a part of the channel the last few months over the summer. And so this isn't goodbye forever, but I just won't be able, I was thinking I'd be lucky to get one show a week, maybe just an hour show, and maybe one every other week on this channel. I still may be doing my chemistry stuff, but that's about it if I'm going to work hard. And I have to tell you, it's going to be a temptation to spend more time on YouTube than I should. And also, the other thing is, now that I'm not homebound and that I'm mobile, I'm able to just now communicate with people in person. So it's been really good to be able to go to church, a brick and mortar church, even though it is McLean Bible, and also to be just fellowshipping with people and getting to meet them and spend time in person. So that's another reason I haven't been on the internet as much, is I'm no longer homebound. And, there's just not enough hours in the day to spend time with everyone you enjoy being with. And so for those who came late, that was kind of the major announcement. And WHM McCord, greetings. Saint Beloved, thank you for joining us. And Pigs Can Fly. Oh, what a nice thing to say. Well, Lord willing, I do hope that my schedule will free up sometime. Hopefully sooner rather than later. So, I will try to drop in maybe every other week at least. Now, I still have a few recorded shows on other people's channels that may appear here. These are recordings I made a couple weeks ago. So I think I'd like to honor the Lord by reading from his word. And I'll just read a passage that I often read. And I've had tremendous fun tonight just talking about a variety of topics. And this isn't one of my 4-hour monologues, mercifully for you all. And let me queue up. Yep, I know what I'll have the end credits after I read this. So let me read this. What then shall we say to these things? If God is for us, who can be against us? He who did not spare his own son, but gave him up for us all, how will he not also with him graciously give us all things? Who shall bring any charge against God's elect? It is God who justifies. Who is to condemn? Christ Jesus is the one who died, more than that, who was raised, who is at the right hand of God, who indeed is interceding for us. Who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Shall tribulation or distress or persecution or famine or nakedness or danger or sword? As it is written, for your sake we are being killed all the day long. We are regarded as sheep to be slaughtered. No, in all these things we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. For I'm sure that neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor rulers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor powers, nor height, nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus, our Lord. And with that, I'm going to prepare I'm going to now run the end credits. It's been a blessing being with you all, and Lord willing, until we meet again, may the Lord richly bless you. And so to say goodbye for this evening, and hopefully either next week or the week after that, we'll see each other. But in the meantime, I will play Rachmaninoff. This is the theme I've played often. It was in the movie Somewhere in Time. It's Rachmaninoff's 18th variation on a theme of Paganini. Take care, and God bless you.